Welcome to Shuffle Source. I'm your host Brandon, and today we are back with another Commander Precon upgrade video. This time we will be upgrading the Scions and Spellcraft Commander deck from the Final Fantasy set. Let's jump into it. So really fast, before discussing the commander we will be using, let's quickly go over the Precon upgrade format that we use here at Shuffle Source. The first item to note is that we will either use the primary or the backup commander. Next, we have a cap of around $100 that we use when choosing the upgrades. We will also be adding 10 cards and removing 10 cards. Additionally, we add a few more upgrades that we like to call no budget options near the end of the video, for people who either already have these cards or maybe have a little bit more in their budget to spend. And lastly, we do use the market value pricing provided by TCG Player at the time of recording, which will be displayed at the bottom of the screen when we discuss the cards. So the commander we will be discussing today is Y'shtola, Knight's Bless. For 1 white, blue, black, we have a 2/4 legendary creature cat warlock that has vigilance. At the beginning of each end step, if a player lost 4 or more life this turn, you draw a card. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, Y'shtola deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. So kicking things off here, she does have Vigilance, which is always nice to have extra keywords, but this really isn't as relevant as her triggered abilities are going to be for us, which are really the point of this deck. So Y'shtola's first triggered ability has a powerful effect. At the beginning of each end step, if a player lost 4 or more life that turn, you get to draw a card. This includes on your opponent's turns as well. So if someone cracks a fetch land, or maybe gets hit for a couple damage, or maybe you sneak in a well-timed spell, we're potentially drawing at every single end step. This gives you a strong incentive to keep incremental damage flowing, and the deck and the upgrades are really built to do that. However, our core strategy is really based off triggering her second ability as often as we can across multiple turns. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, Y'shtola deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. That's a huge payoff for casting non-creature spells with mana 3 or greater. So in a normal game of Commander, that's 6 damage across 3 opponents, and you're gaining 2 life every time we cast a qualifying spell. It's also important to note that she is the one dealing the damage, because that will factor into some of the additions that we will be putting into this deck. One of the best parts about Y'shtola is how flexible her value engine really is. You don't have to swing in or commit to a board full of creatures, you just need to cast spells. They don't even have to resolve, you just need to cast them. So we're going to upgrade this deck by adding more non-creature spells that cost 3 or more to trigger Y'shtola's damaging ability. We're also going to be adding cards that generate value off of damage being dealt by her. And lastly, we're going to be adding ways to protect Y'shtola in addition to cards that help us chain spells more efficiently to help set up some explosive turns. So here we have the first of the additions coming in at $12.28. We have Bloodchief Ascension. For 1 black mana. It is an enchantment that says at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Bloodchief Ascension. Damage causes loss of life. Whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if Bloodchief Ascension has 3 or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life. If you do, you gain 2 life. So Bloodchief Ascension is a very good card in this deck for several reasons. The first is that it's a low cost spell. For just 1 mana, it's cheap to play and you can pretty much fit it in on any turn. It's also very easy to get the quest counters on it in this deck. Y'shtola has the ability to deal 2 damage to each opponent whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater. Realistically, casting just 1 qualifying spell per turn will reliably add counters, and you only need to get up to 3 before this turns on. I mean, even just opponents hitting each other or taking damage from other sources can also power this up. Additionally, once Bloodchief Ascension is online, we're basically going to punish players for just playing the game. I mean, even if they're just casting spells or something, those spells are going to end up in the graveyard and they're going to lose life. So as you can imagine, this card is devastating to have out and online against any opponent who's using self-mill or graveyard focused decks. They're just going to take so much damage from this being out on the battlefield. So one idea, just for a simple finisher, you can add Jadur Aristocratic Capital, which is a new town card from the Final Fantasy set. Its Adventure Side Overture has us have our opponent mill half of their library. That's enough to just instantly take them out of the game if Bloodchief Ascension is active. Now sure, this really isn't a mill deck, but the opportunity cost to swap this out for a single basic land or one of the other tapped lands in this deck is just so low. And on top of everything else, you can gain a lot of life with this card. So here we have our next edition coming in at $12.18. We have Clever Concealment. For 2 colorless and 2 white, we have an instant that has Convoke. Your creatures can help cast the spell. Each creature you tap while casting the spell pays for 1, or 1 mana of that creature's color. It also says any number of target non-land permanents you control phase out. Treat them and anything attached to them as though they don't exist until your next turn. So this is just a great option for protecting your entire board, especially your commander, who, let's be real, will become a high priority target once your spell casting damage engine gets really rolling. However, the best part is Y'shtola will likely be enchanted or have artifacts attached to her, and those pieces will phase out with her, keeping your whole setup safe. This is just a very clean way to dodge board wipes, exile effects, or any sort of targeted removal. I also sort of enjoy the idea that if an opponent tries to remove your commander, you can respond by casting Clever Concealment, which has a mana value of 4, which will phase her out, trigger Y'shtola's damaging ability in the process. So that means that they're going to take 2 damage, you'll gain 2 life, and everything is still protected. Talk about a plan really backfiring on your opponents. Also, let's not forget that with Convoke, we can tap down creatures to help us cast this spell for free or nearly free. So this is just a very flexible and powerful defensive spell to add to this deck. So here we have the next of our additions coming in at $16.20. We have Deadly Rollick. For 3 colorless and 1 black, we have an instant that says if you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. Exile target creature. So Deadly Rollick is a premium removal spell in this deck, and if Y'shtola is in play, you can cast this for free thanks to the commander on the battlefield alternative cost. However, the best part is that even though you're casting it for 0 mana, its mana value is still 4, which means it will trigger Y'shtola's damaging ability. So just by casting this spell, you get to exile a creature at instant speed and deal 2 damage to each opponent and gain yourself 2 life. So that makes this card not only a very strong removal tool, but also a way to fuel our engine without spending any mana. So Deadly Rollick is just a great example of the type of spells that we want to add to this deck. Here we have our next edition coming in at $3.34. We have Dismember. For 1 and 2 black Phyrexian, we have an instant that says the Phyrexian mana can be paid with either black or 2 life. Target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. So this is another decent piece of targeted removal to add to this deck. What makes Dismember great here is its flexible cost. You have to pay the 1 colorless, but then you are able to use life as a resource to help satisfy the other black pips, instead of necessarily using mana to pay the cost. So that flexibility makes this an easy spell to cast even when you're low on available mana, or you want to chain multiple spells per turn, which we do. The best part is that the actual mana value of this spell is 3, so it will trigger Y'shtola's damaging ability. So that means when we cast it, Y'shtola's going to deal 2 damage to each opponent, and we're going to gain 2 life. The life gain will help us offset the life that we may have paid to also cast the spell. So this deck has multiple sources of life gain, including from our commander, so spending a little bit of life to cast some spells is a great trade-off. And here's our next edition coming in at 31 cents. We have Frantic Search for 2 colorless and a blue. We have an instant that says draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, untap up to 3 lands. So this is another great spell to cast when Y'shtola is in play because it will trigger her damaging ability. Then we get to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards and untap 3 lands, effectively making it free for us to cast. Now, while you might be put off a little bit by the discarding part, this does help us filter our hand and dig for more spells to keep our engine going. And in some cases, it allows us to set up our graveyard, as we do have some cards that interact with it. Additionally, seeing how we basically get refunded the mana for the spell, we can potentially follow that up with another 3 mana spell to trigger Y'shtola's damaging ability again, which if we do that means it will trigger her first ability and will allow us to draw a card at the beginning of the end step because a player would have lost 4 or more life this turn. So here's our next edition coming in at $7.42. We have Helm of the Gas Lord for 3 colorless and either a blue or a black. We have an enchantment aura that says enchant creature. As long as enchanted creature is blue, it gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, draw a card. As long as enchanted creature is black, it gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, that player discards a card. So here's an example of an amazing aura that we want to put on Y'shtola. Because Y'shtola is both a blue and a black creature, she will get the full benefit from Helm of the Gas Lord. So that means she will get +2/+2 and will draw a card whenever she deals damage to an opponent, and that opponent will also discard a card. So I'm sure you figured out that that's actually really good with Y'shtola's triggered ability. as it will deal 2 damage to each opponent whenever we cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater. Since she is the source of the damage, all of the Helm of the Gas Lord's effects trigger separately for each opponent hit. So that means in a game of Commander, as long as all of the opponents are still alive, you're going to get to draw up to 3 cards for each opponent, and each opponent will have to discard a card. And that's in addition to the 2 damage that they were going to take and you gaining 2 life. The +2/+2 buff also helps her survive better in combat in case we find either a good attack targets or need to block. Here we have our next edition for $17.38. We have Ophidian Eye. For 2 colorless and 1 blue, we have an enchantment aura that has flash. You may play this spell anytime you can play an instant. Enchant creature. Whenever an enchanted creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. So first off, this is a 3 mana non-creature spell, which means just by casting it with Y'shtola in play, we will trigger her damaging ability. The ideal creature to enchant with this spell will definitely be Y'shtola herself. That's because when she does trigger her damaging ability, she will deal damage to each opponent. Since she's the one doing the damage, Ophidian Eye will let us draw a card for each opponent damaged. So in a standard game of Commander, that can easily mean drawing 3 cards every time we trigger her ability with this attached. Now I will tell you that this card is very expensive right now, so if you're interested in a more budget-friendly card that is similar, check out Curiosity. It does a similar job, just without flash and the 3 mana threshold, so it won't trigger Y'shtola when we cast it. But we also save 2 mana, and it does afford us that card draw engine. Honestly, there's a case to play both if you can. So here we have our next edition for $4.34. We have Sigil of Sleep for 1 blue mana. It is an enchantment aura that says enchant creature. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage to a player, return target creature that player controls to its owner's hand. So this is just another excellent synergy piece with Y'shtola. Just like Ophidian Eye, we get value every time our opponents take damage with this attached to our commander. Y'shtola's triggered ability deals 2 damage to each opponent, and because again she's the source of the damage being dealt, it will trigger Sigil of Sleep. So that means in a game of Commander you can bounce up to 3 creatures, 1 for each opponent, for every time you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater. So because we want to cast a lot of mana value 3 or greater spells with this deck, Sigil of Sleep just becomes a great source of repeated control. We're going to be able to bounce key creatures or combo pieces right back to our opponent's hands, disrupting their plans over and over again. So here's our next edition coming in at $1.22. We have Swiftfoot Boots for 2 colorless. We have an artifact equipment that says equipped creature has hexproof and haste, and it has an equip cost of 1. So Swiftfoot Boots just continues to be a very efficient way to keep our commander, or any other creature for that matter we equip this to, protected from targeted removal. So being able to give her hexproof with Swiftfoot Boots is very good. It also gives haste, which in some situations may become relevant to either swing in for combat or activate an ability of a creature that we cast that turn. Now why we chose Swiftfoot Boots over Lightning Greaves is because Lightning Greaves gives her Shroud, which will also stop us from being able to target her with spells. And as you can see from some of the upgrades we've done, we want to be able to target her with spells, but also keep her protected. And here we have the last of our editions coming in at 89 cents. We have Unwind for 2 colorless and 1 blue. We have an instant that says counter target non-creature spell, untap up to 3 lands. So Unwind fits right in with this deck. Just like Frantic Search, it's going to give us our mana back when it resolves by untapping 3 lands, which helps us keep up mana for more spells. And because it is a non-creature spell mana value 3 or greater, it will trigger Y'shtola's damaging ability. So adding another counterspell in this deck is also very helpful. This is just another way to protect Y'shtola from targeted removal, or we can just stop an opponent's key non-creature spell before it becomes an issue. So this deck doesn't run a ton of counterspells out of the box, so adding Unwind just gives us more interaction without really slowing us down. So we've now made it to the removals portion of the video, and we're going to kick things off with Ardbert, Warrior of Darkness. For 1, a white and a black, we have a 2/2 legendary creature Spirit Warrior that says, whenever you cast a white spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each legendary creature you control. They gain vigilance until end of turn. Whenever you cast a black spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each legendary creature you control. They gain menace until end of turn. So while Ardbert does offer buffs to legendary creatures whenever we cast a white or a black spell, our deck is really not focused on combat or really building a wide board of legendary creatures. As we've mentioned, this deck's real payoffs come from casting mana value 3 or greater non-creature spells to trigger Y'shtola's damage, life gain, and card draw engine. Ardbert would be better suited in a legendary creature focused deck, or honestly just have him have his own deck with him as the commander. So here's our next removal, Astrologian's Planisphere. For 1 colorless and 1 blue, we have an artifact equipment with Job Select. When this equipment enters, create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token, then attach this to it. Equipped creature is a wizard in addition to its other types, and has whenever you cast a non-creature spell and whenever you draw your third card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. It also has an equipped ability called Diana for 2 colorless. So while this card does have some synergy with casting non-creature spells and drawing cards, its payoff is +1/+1 counters on a single creature, which doesn't really support our deck's main strategy. Y'shtola really isn't a combat-focused commander, so buffing up a token or your commander really doesn't meaningfully advance our game plan. Also, with it being only 2 mana, it's not going to trigger Y'shtola's damaging ability. Here we have our next removal, Bastion of Remembrance for 2 colors and a black. We have an enchantment that says, when this enchantment enters, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So this card works fine in aristocrat style decks, but our deck really isn't focused on creating or sacrificing creatures for value. With Y'shtola as the commander, the deck really leans more into casting non-creature spells and doing triggered burn effects, not death triggers. Bastion of Remembrance likely makes more sense with the backup commander, Grahatia, but it's sort of out of place with our current game plan. Here's our next removal, Coveted Jewel for 6 colorless. We have an artifact that says when this artifact enters, draw 3 cards. You can also tap it, add 3 mana of any 1 color. Whenever 1 or more creatures an opponent controls attack you and aren't blocked, that player draws 3 cards and gains control of this artifact. Untap it. Now, while drawing 3 cards and generating 3 mana per turn can be powerful, Coveted Jewel is a risky and slow card in this deck. So while this deck does have some creatures in it and ways to make creature tokens, we really don't have a lot of ways to defend Coveted Jewel. Plus, the mana value on this spell is 6. Which can really be clunky and kind of competes with more efficient lines of play. So our deck already has safer and more synergistic card draw engines that better support our spell slinging strategy. And here we have the next of our removals, Hildebrand Manderville for 1 colorless and 1 white. We have a 2/2 legendary creature human detective that has creature tokens you control get +1/+1. Whenever Hildebrand Manderville dies, you may cast it from your graveyard as an adventure until the end of your next turn. It then also has an adventure side, Gentleman's Rise for 2 colorless and a black. It is an instant that says create a 2/2 black zombie creature token, then exile this card. You may cast this creature later from exile. So Hildebrand was likely included for this for the backup commander, which tends to be more token focused. While the adventure side does have a 3 mana cost non-creature spell which can trigger Y'shtola's damaging ability, the overall impact from this card is pretty minimal and the synergy is quite weak, and our focus really isn't on that. So here's our next removal, Into the Story for 5 colorless and 2 blue. We have an instant that says this spell costs 3 less to cast if an opponent has 7 or more cards in their graveyard. Draw 4 cards. So while drawing 4 cards at instant speed is strong, Into the Story relies on a condition that our deck isn't built to consistently meet. Since we're really not running mill effects, the cost reduction is unreliable, and at the full cost, it's just too expensive. Additionally, we're already adding more reliable and repeated sources of card draw, which is just better. Our next removal is Sage's Newlith. For 1 colorless and 1 blue, we have an artifact equipment with Job Select. When this equipment enters, create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token, then attach this to it. Equipped creature gets +1 and +0 and has whenever this creature attacks, untap target attacking creature, and is a cleric in addition to its other types. It also has an equipped ability called Hagnia for 3 colorless. So Sage's Newlith really focuses on combat-based value by untapping our attacking creatures. So while that mechanic can be good, it really doesn't align with our deck's core strategy. Again, Y'shtola really isn't combat focused, and this equipment offers no synergy with non-creature spells. It also offers no protection and doesn't provide any card advantage. So here we have our next removal, Thancred Waters for 4 colorless and 1 white. We have a 3/5 legendary creature human warrior that has flash. Royal Guard. When Thancred Waters enters, another target legendary permanent you control gains indestructible for as long as you control Thancred Waters. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Thancred Waters gains indestructible until end of turn. So Thancred is obviously meant to protect our commander, but 5 mana is a steep investment for a reactive effect. Now, while it does grant indestructible to a legendary permanent, Clever Concealment, which we did add, already fills the protection role more effectively. It also has the potential to be lower cost due to Convoke. So other than that ability to give something indestructible, Thancred really doesn't synergize well with our non-creature spell focused engine. I also want to call out here that while indestructible is good, the format has been moving a lot more towards exile removal because it just tends to be better, and this card will not help us against exile based effects. And our next removal is Tome of Legends. For 2 colorless, we have an artifact that says this artifact enters with a page counter on it. Whenever your commander enters or attacks, put a page counter on this artifact. You can also pay 1, tap it, remove a page counter from this artifact, draw a card. So Tome of Legends relies on our commander both entering and attacking. However, Y'shtola really isn't built to be that aggressive of a commander. She does have vigilance, but honestly in the mid to late game, you're probably not attacking with her all that much. And that's because attacking with her later on in the game can be risky due to her lack of evasion. Seeing how combat with our commander really isn't our strategy, Tome of Legend won't consistently generate value for us, so for those reasons we're going to cut the card. So here we have the last of our removals, and I apologize in advance for butchering this name. We have Urianger Augerelt for 1 white and 1 blue. We have a 1/3 legendary creature Elf Advisor. Whenever you play a land from exile or cast a spell from exile, you gain 2 life. We also have Draw Arcanum. You can tap this, look at the top card of your library, you may exile it face down. And we also have Play Arcanum, where we can tap this card. Until end of turn, you may play cards exiled with Urianger Augerelt. Spells you cast this way cost 2 less to cast. While Urianger's abilities aren't bad, they really center around playing cards from exile, which is not really what this deck does. Our deck, as you know, is more focused on casting 3+ mana value non-creature spells to trigger Y'shtola's damaging ability as much as we can. Urianger's value engine really just doesn't synergize with the rest of the deck that we have, and would honestly just be better off in another deck. So we've made it to the no budget options part of the video, and we're kicking things off for $30.62. We have Delny, Streetwise Lookout. For 2 colorless and a white, we have a 2/2 legendary creature Human Scout that says creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. If an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So Delny is just a really powerful card when paired with creatures who have strong triggered abilities. Y'shtola, our commander, happens to fit that description perfectly. Y'shtola only has 2 power, which means when Delny is on the battlefield, anytime our damaging triggered ability would trigger, it would trigger an additional time. So that means whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, Y'shtola's damaging ability will deal 4 damage total to each opponent, and we will gain 4 life. Additionally, because the damage ability would trigger twice, it also makes it much easier to consistently meet the 4 or more life lost condition to draw a card at each end step. With Delny out, a single spell can unlock our commander's entire suite of triggered abilities. Also, with Y'shtola only having 2 power, Delny's going to allow us to chip in with some combat damage with our commander. Delny just provides a lot of value for us and can make our powerful commander even more powerful. Here we have the next of our no budget options coming in at $47.89. We have Rhystic Study. For 2 colorless and 1 blue, we have an enchantment that says whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. Rhystic Study just continues to be an absolute staple in blue decks. This is a very powerful source of repeated card draw and is definitely on the Game Changers list for a reason. It also happens to be a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, so it will trigger Y'shtola's damaging ability. But really it's in here for that powerful, consistent card draw that helps us dig for our 3+ mana value non-creature spells to really keep the pressure going. Yes, our opponents can pay the 1 to stop us from drawing a card, but that means we're having them spend their mana to stop us from drawing cards instead of furthering their own game plan. If left unchecked, Rhystic Study will tax our opponents, allow us to draw extra cards over time, and really help us keep our hand full, which is very important in the spell slinging deck. And here we have the last of the no budget options coming in at $50.73. We have Vampiric Tutor. For 1 black, we have an instant that says search your library for a card, then shuffle and put that card on top. You lose 2 life. So this is really a top tier tutor that fits seamlessly into our deck. Now, while it won't necessarily trigger Y'shtola's damaging ability since it's only mana value 1, it more than makes up for that by being able to set up our next move to handle any situation. At instant speed and for just 1 mana and 2 life, we get to search our library for any card. That can be our best spell, a combo piece, protection, or the answer to any problem. We then get to put that on top of our deck and draw it on our next turn, or sooner if we trigger it through some other form of card draw. Alternatively, if you're looking for a more budget-friendly tutor that also happens to trigger Ishtola's damaging ability when you cast it, check out Grim Tutor. Now it does cost more mana and life to resolve, but it will also put the card directly into your hand instead of on top of your library. As a quick reminder, the 500 subscriber giveaway is still going on right now, where you can win a Final Fantasy bundle and a Secret Lair Japanese foil Gilded Lotus. The giveaway closes on July 13th, so go ahead and get your entries in while you still can. For information on how to enter and for full giveaway details, please click on the 500 subscriber giveaway link in the description below. Thank you and good luck to everyone who enters. And there you have it. After upgrading this deck, we have a final upgrade cost of $75.56. This total does not include the no budget options that we went over. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the Scions and Spellcraft Precon. Which cards did you end up adding or removing from your deck? Are there any other Final Fantasy commanders that you're interested in building? Let me know. If you want to see the Final Fantasy Precon decks in action, you can click on the video link here and watch me and 3 of my friends battle it out to see who takes the victory. Until next time, thank you for watching.